Hey geeks, welcome to another exciting episode of Rockin The Code World with dotNetDave. I'm David McCarter. I'm glad you're here. We've had a couple weeks off, and it's been I don't know for you, but it's been a kind of a busy week, not only with me, but stuff going on in America and I guess the world. And anyway, I'm glad you're back, and I have an exciting show today. It's show 79. I can't believe it's almost 80 already. Simon, gosh, I can't believe it. Anyway, I've got two awesome guests today, John Kattenhorn and Vincent Hoogendoorn, and we're going to be talking about modular monoliths. So get your questions ready, post them in the comments, and we'll get to them as fast as we can. Because this is your show, and so I want you to ask questions of the guests I get to come on board and talk to you all. So anyway, I've got lots of stuff to talk about today, so I'm going to jump into it. First, I want to promote the Code Quality Conference happening next month already. It's less than a month now. I'm so excited. We're going to be doing the Code Quality Conference on June 2nd. If you haven't submitted your papers, you need to do it this weekend because Simon and I are going to pick the speakers next week, early next week. So if you haven't submitted, do it now. Don't procrastinate like I do, and put it on your calendar to watch it all day long on June 2nd, because we're going to have another great lineup, a lot of great talks, and all these talks you need to watch because code quality. If you follow me on Twitter, code quality is something I see severely lacking in the teams that hire me, and so this is why I do this conference along with CSharpCorner. And so I hope not only will you speak, but I hope that you'll attend and make this a great virtual conference for everyone. All right. I during these 2 weeks, I released brand new versions of not only my Spargin open source libraries and NuGet packages. They're brand new for May, but I also released a brand new version of the Spargin dev tool, and it's got some bug fixes in it, but I actually, and I'll talk a little bit about this in a second, but I actually translated to work with people who speak Spanish, Danish, and Hindi. So if you speak any of those languages, download it and let me know how it works, because it's hard for me to really test it. So anyway, I hope you go check those out, because I work really hard on both those projects, and I hope you get some use from it, because I use both every day, and so I hope you will too. I have a brand new article, speaking about translation. I have a brand new article called Globalizing Strings in Microsoft.NET with a multilingual app toolkit I discovered while I was looking into some globalization stuff. And I hope you read the article, because one of the really time-consuming and costly things when you do translate to use for your program to do different languages and locales, one of the most expensive and time-consuming things is actually the translation. But if you read the article, we can actually use Azure to do that for us, and I did that. And so if you speak Spanish, Hindi, or Danish, you can see how I did that, and with the multilingual app toolkit. I think it's really cool, and it was really easy, really fast, and it didn't take me a ton of time to figure out either. So, but I kind of distilled it down to the most easiest parts for that article, and so I hope you check it out. I've already been thinking about season 4 of the show, which starts at the beginning of October. And whenever I start thinking about like a next season of the show, or the next year I'm going to be speaking, I try to come up with new graphics or videos and logos, things like that, because I like doing that stuff. So the other day, a couple of weeks ago, I was inspired to do a new logo for the show. I haven't even showed Simon, so we'll see what Simon says about it. But keeping with the rock and roll theme, I wanted to get inspiration from one of the albums that I really liked when I was growing up, and I did that. I basically copied the album cover, changed the wording, and this is it. So this is my first proposed logo for season 4. I kind of want your input, see if you like it. If you don't like it, do you know what it means? I don't know. But if you live in the US and you can tweet to me the band that I got that inspiration from, I'll send you an autographed copy of my code performance book. US addresses only, sorry, because it costs so freaking much now to send internationally. Simon knows that. So let me know what you think. Yeah, I totally ripped it off from a band. And I even got the same font they used on the album cover to do my album cover, my pseudo album cover. So let me know what you think. Put it in the chat or tweet about it. And if you know what band I got that inspiration from, tweet that and I'll send you a copy of my book. All right. So, the last 2 weeks, one of the things that's been in the news a lot what's been in the news a lot lately is artificial intelligence. And, that's becoming more and more popular. I think we're still in the infant stage, really, if you ask me about it. And I'm already starting to use it. And it's on the news a lot. And even, at least in America, they're already talking about, shutting it down or trying to curtail it. And I don't know, it doesn't make much sense to me because there's no way they can really do that. And so anyway, I've been thinking a lot about it. So what do you think about the upcoming revolution, I think, that we're having? And to me, I think we're in a new internet bubble. At least that's what it feels for me. And I know a lot of you were too young or maybe not even born when we had the internet bubble, but I was there. I was part of it and lived through it, good or bad. And I'm kind of feeling that now with AI. The possibilities are just immense and almost too immense to think about it. And so I'm curious, what do you think the AI revolution is going to be, the new internet bubble? Maybe not that it dies after a few years like the internet bubble did, but just what do you think about AI? I'm already using it, and to help me write articles and things like that. I'm even used it to help me fix up my resume, and I've gotten good success with it. It's not perfect, nothing's perfect, but I'm already using it and trying to take advantage of it. And so, my question is kind of, what do you see in the next 10 years with AI? How will our world change in the next 10 years? I think, the world that we live in 10 years from now is going to be completely unrecognizable from today, because I think that's how much AI will impact our world. And, unfortunately, there's a lot of great parts to AI. I know a lot of people are going to use it for bad too. So, I've been thinking a lot about this. Our world is going to radically change. At least that's what I think. And are we up for it? And one of the reasons I kind of wanted to talk about it on the show is because, I've predicted things before. I won't talk about them now, but I didn't have any proof that I really did that. And I doubt if my friends remember me predicting it, 20 years ago or whatever. And so I wanted to at least get this recorded. So 10 years from now, I can say, see, I told you. So what do you think about AI? Put it in the chat or, tweet at me and let's talk about it. And hopefully I can get some AI people on the show sooner than later. I will try for that. All right. All right. So I want to bring on my guests. John Kattenhorn is the founder of Applicita, a Microsoft first software services and technology company based in the UK. With a strong background in software development and a passion for technology, John has dedicated his career to creating innovative solutions that make a tangible difference in the lives for both business and consumers. That's good. Vincent Vince, I'm already screwing up names, is a Microsoft MVP developer technologies, just like me, with over 20 years experience as hands-on .NET innovator, architect, engineer. Vincent is currently focused on full stack C# development with Microsoft Orleans 7 and backend C# Markup 2 for browser and native frontends. Welcome, guys.
Hey, Dave. Welcome.
Hi.
Sorry,
thanks for having us.
When I'm trying to go fast, I screw up things sometimes. I'm sorry about that.
You did great.
Yeah, no problem. My name is not simple to pronounce correctly, but I just listened to VincentH.net, and then people find it easier.
So tell everybody where you're from.
Do you want to go first, Vincent?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
You want to go first? Yeah, sure. I want. So I'm from the Netherlands, which explains my difficult to pronounce last name. I'm from a small town in the Netherlands, which is in an area that we call the Green Heart. So it's right in the middle of all the big cities. There's a big green area, and right in the middle of that is a small village called Boskoop. I won't ask you to pronounce that either. And that's where I live. And I'm happily working remotely mostly, and enjoying a lot of the wonderful environment here, because where I'm sitting is like the royal capital of gardening. So that all the royal suppliers of gardens, they are historically around here. So that's where I take my walks. I'm just a lucky guy. That's what I was.
And John, where are you from?
Yeah, so I'm based in the UK. So I live in a place called Northampton. I know there's a Northampton in Pennsylvania, I think, in the US. But
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, the interesting thing about where I live is if you were to draw like lines across the country, I live like geographically right smack bang in the middle of the country, which makes us basically the logistics hub of the country. So we have also like a lot of F1 here and like precision engineering, kind of that kind of stuff as well. But yeah, more recently, with the advent of e-commerce and stuff, you'll see, unfortunately, most of our green is being torn up for very, very large warehouses and, more sophisticated road systems and stuff. But yeah, I was born in North London, kind of within the shadow of our national stadium, kind of like Wembley. So used to, sit out in the back garden and listen to all the big concerts, Band Aid, for instance, I listened to in the 80s and kind of like all the football and stuff. But yeah, my mum and dad got on the motorway and drove north until they could afford a house, apparently. So that's kind of how we and how I ended up here. But yeah, it's been I've worked remotely since we founded Applicita 2012. That was by design. So I was kind of influenced by I can't pronounce their name, but the people who created Jira. So what's that? Asaland. They published a really influential book and like blog post, and I was like, that's exactly how I want my company to work. So kind of we were been remote forever. Obviously, lots of people have like catching up. So we've got people from all over, the Netherlands, the Ukraine, Russia, kind of Bosnia, kind of all over it's really about where the talent is and kind of finding passionate people about .NET.
Cool. Yeah, I'm going to be kind of close to you guys in August. I'm going to Copenhagen, speak at a conference there, and so it'll actually be my first time speaking in the UK. So I'm really excited. Especially since my heritage is from that area. Right. I've never actually visited there except for going through airports, and so I'm really excited. And not only am I excited about that, but I'm going to see some people I haven't seen in a long time, who's coming to that conference to speak, like Mads Torkensen, who I haven't seen in a while. Carl Franklin's coming, and Carl Franklin and I used to pack the top of the Marriott bar in San Francisco in the late 90s, before a conference every year. And so, So I'm really looking forward to getting the heck out of, America and going somewhere and speaking, and it's going to be fun.
We're probably crossing the air then, because I'm coming to Seattle in, I think I fly on the 15th, I think. So I'm doing a conference with called Dev Camp for Wilderness Labs, who are the kind of, .NET on an IoT micro controller, and then I'm been asked to stay on and join a few people on the build conference, and catch up with a couple of people in DevDiv as well. So that's going to be kind of cool as well. I haven't been to Seattle now for 2 or 3 years, so looking forward to catching up with a few people. And I've never taken my picture outside of, HQ, the mothership, like everybody else as well. So this time I definitely will have my picture taken by the sign, like everybody else, but I've been 2 or 3 times, I've just never done it. So I've got to get it done.
I haven't done that either. It's just, when everybody does something, then I go, yeah, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So today we're going
to.
It's like people go to the Taj Mahal and they do the thing with the,
Yeah. Leaning Tower of Pisa is another favorite, right?
Yeah. So we're going to be talking about modular monoliths today, and and everybody out there, if you have questions about this subject, please post them now so we can get them answered. But I'm not sure what you guys want to talk about, but I at least wanted to ask, kind of get everybody on the same page, and that is, what is a modular monolith, and how does it differ from different software architectures?
Yeah.
Shall I take that?
Say that. Definitely say that.
Okay. Yeah. So, well, basically, modular just means that you have logical boundaries in your software. So the whole distinction between microservices, monoliths, and modular monoliths is basically about the stuff that your boundaries are made of. So are they physical or are they logical? That's really the whole thing.
Yeah.
So maintainability always requires that if you don't want a big ball of mud, you have to have modular software. You have to have boundaries with a high cohesion and low coupling, right? Otherwise, it's not maintainable. But so it's really just about what is the stuff that you construct your boundaries from, and when do you do that? And can you change the stuff while you're doing it? So can you start logical and then go physical, which is what microservices are about, physical separation. But in terms of coding, there's not a lot of difference there. They're just boundaries.
Right.
I'm not sure if that answers the question clearly.
No, it does. And I can think a lot about the projects because I'm a consultant, so I usually end up on teams that are in trouble already, and so it's and one of the things I notice about when I do join new teams and everything is that it seems like they might have had that idea, but it didn't happen, right? And they seem to have, like you said, have very tight coupling. You change one thing, it breaks everything, and it just and getting from that to what you're talking about, is for some companies impossible, right? Without enough money and enough people who really want to do that, right?
Yeah.
And so
I think this comes from a business's lack of understanding of the total cost of owning a piece of software. Most businesses just look at the initial capital cost of building something, and that sort of gets transmitted down to the development teams. Hey, do this as fast as possible, and don't spare the horses, kind of thing. And when they obviously then have that thing in production for like a couple of years or whatever, it suddenly dawns on them that why is this thing so expensive to maintain? So I do a very similar job to you, like as part of what we do at Applicita, and one of the first things we try and teach businesses is the total cost of owning a piece of software. Not because we want to charge them more or earn more money, we really want them to understand the total cost of certain decisions they make. So it's interesting that the thing that you flashed up there about multilingual, the two questions I always ask is, are you ever going to plan to be a multilingual? Is this application ever going to be multilingual? And I challenge them really hard, and I normally convince them that they probably will make it multilingual at some point. And the second thing is, are you ever going to need tenancy in a way that needs a sort of hard security balancing, multi-tenancy? Because both of those things are really difficult to retrofit. They're expensive, and they, difficult to do in transit. It's like, trying to drive an ambulance while replacing the engine, So it's kind of like, it's all really about educating businesses, I think, about technical folk generally aren't very good at getting over the impact of
Right.
certain decisions. We're not built that way, as and I've had to learn that skill, working in the boardroom, really, So I think that's where all that comes from. Good intentions, downward pressure on business, through ignorance over total cost of ownership, for sure.
Yeah, and you bring up the multilingual thing, and everybody out there, I hope you read my article. But one of the things I stated at the very beginning of the article is that 100% of the companies I've joined did not do that, right?
Yeah.
And at some point they get into a real quagmire mess, right?
Yeah.
And I have lots of stories because I've been through this process many times, but I've yet to see a team ever do that correctly from the beginning, right? And they always shoot themselves in the foot. And one of the things I state, in the article is that I guarantee you it's going to have to be used in different languages these days, right? Because we live in a global economy right now, right? And I can almost guarantee you 99.99% is going to be translated at some point, right? And doing it later, kind of like, going from a monolith to a more modular, thing is very expensive and very time consuming, right? So how do you, and so one of the things I've had trouble with, in my career is trying to get that across to the management. And so how do you do that? How do you get management to understand what we're really talking about?
So it's an interesting thing. So I use a couple of graphs and stuff, which I've used from and some case studies. So like, concrete information. I mean, I was telling Vincent the other day, I used to have an email framed in on my wall from one of my managers from when I used to work for a company that said, please stop doing unit tests and stop doing integration tests. We can't afford to do them. We need to get this out, right? And then that particular company, and I won't name them, then suddenly realized 5 years later that it took 3 months to do an integration test of their product. It sort of got to a tipping point where it was so feature complete, and so we literally could only do 3 releases a year because it took that long to do the integration test. And I use this over and over again in kind of like boardrooms and stuff that says, look, here's try and quantify it for people. Like you get the attention of the finance people if you kind of like do some modeling for them and say, right, okay, let's say your thing is capital cost is like $1 million, and how long do you want this thing to be amortized over? Okay, well, let's give it a useful shelf life of 5 years or 10 years. Okay, and then you sort of I've got a couple of formulas I use that say, okay, well, if you do it this way, this is what the curve looks like, with like tests and stuff. If you don't do it this way, this is what the curve looks like, And they're like, okay, we didn't know that, we didn't appreciate that, And it's not it is an ignorance thing. It's a lack of experience, and I think we technicians, I was saying to Vincent the other day, we have a duty of care almost to businesses to try and find ways to communicate to businesses in ways they understand about what we do. We're not very good at, as technicians, we're not very good at making businesses understand what, how difficult things are, how easy some other things are as well. I've been in many conversations where people say, oh, we didn't ask you because we thought that'd be really hard. And we're like, no, it's really easy, And then they'll ask you something else. And no, that's really hard. And they're like, well, why? That looks really easy. Trying to break down those barriers, I think, will really eventually help us all build more fit for purpose software, for businesses that kind of make, positive business impact, and that's kind of been my, probably for the last sort of 10 years, kind of like my slant on what we do and how we develop our software. It's kind of like my trying to work at the business end, as well as, still trying to be, I'm a frustrated developer now. I said to Vincent, when I retire, I'm just going to code for a living, because that's what I used to do.
That's the spirit, yes. So, and when I try to, explain things to people who are not deeply technical, I just basically I tell them what are the benefits of it. So I'm not trying to tell them to try to share the insights. They're welcome to do that. But the thing that they care about is simply, okay, is it going to be faster to market? Is it going to be can I scale larger? What are my runtime cloud costs initially? And how quickly can my developers change things or add new features? So, and how big is my team? Does my team need to be? What skills do I need? So those are the things that quickly translate to organizations and costs. And well, managers understand those things really well. So if you are, and this is also one of the things in this whole topic of modular monoliths versus microservices. If you really understand what are the consequences, or basically the reasons why you want to do something or why you don't want to do it right now, but maybe later, if you really understand that, you will make better choices. So it helps you actually to do this with managers and not just look at it in a technical community and say, okay, this is the future, this is the trend, this is Netflix does it must be good, right? Stuff like that is one of the major faults, right? So one of the things I often found with microservices architectures is I find a single team working on a project or a product, and they have many microservices. And I said, well, okay, but this pattern, this microservices pattern, is basically an organizational pattern. It's meant to be able to have multiple teams build and deploy independently. This is what microservices were thought for. So why are you doing this with a single team? So the fact that people, and there may be some reasons still to do that, but more often than not, they just didn't understand the underlying reasons for the pattern. So this is where you make the biggest gains in any project, to challenge anything that are assumptions by yourselves or anyone else, and to challenge any unknowns. Just make sure that you understand why you're doing what you're doing, and if you don't know why, just don't do it. That's basically my advice, because don't do it saves costs.
Or ask somebody who's an expert to come help you or something. It's we all don't know everything, and it's really good to bring in experts like that to kind of get you on the road to the right path of what the end goal is. But that I've always and I'm kind of feeling this right now in the team I'm working in, but there's always this like push and pull between management and the technical team, right? And the one thing I learned a long time ago is that we care about technology, but management cares about money, right?
True.
And so a long time ago, I have this story I won't share now, but I learned that because I kept trying to get management to do something, and they just kept ignoring me. And as soon as I could explain that in dollars and cents, they go, "Oh yeah, okay, let's do that." And it was that easy. All I had to do was explain it in their language, which is money and time, right?
And it keeps you honest, right? It just keeps you honest, because the shiny factor is then only done when it's actually beneficial to the customer. Right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's the common patterns I see, like with guys or teams that have jumped in with microservices with both feet, is you find a single database like at the back of all of these services, and you're like, okay, so how do you do your your deployment strategy or whatever? And they're like, yeah, we deploy all the services all the time. And you're like, okay, that doesn't sound much like microservices as an architecture to me. No. And the second thing is slightly less impactful, I suppose, is the UI. So I've seen some quite nice architected backends with proper kind of separation of concerns around the data and all the things you'd normally see, and then you see this great big Angular UI which has to be shipped every time or something. It's kind of like across these services, and again, that sort of feels a bit odd as well. It's really difficult to do microservices well, so you have to really have a reason for it. And the first time it came across my radar, like many other people, was the famous Netflix kind of diagram and article that was written about that. But and I've tried to find it since. I can't find it, because I'd like to reread it in terms of that organizational point, because if they didn't make that clear in terms of our requirement was that we had a team of 1,500, whatever it was, and we need to deliver in parallel. So the only way we can do that is to break our structured monolith up into individual deployable services so that we can all move forward at a different speed. Otherwise, we're all going to work to the slowest deploying team or whatever. So To Vincent's point, it's absolutely right. It is an organizational pattern for the most part, with of course some rare exceptions around, extreme differences in scale and, some other bits and pieces. But, it's nice to see some awakening, I think, in terms of the modular monolith and our best kept secret, as we call it as well, in Orleans, or Project Orleans as it used to be called when I first got involved.
Yeah.
So Martin Fowler wrote in 2015, so 8 years ago, he wrote an article that's titled "Monolith First," and it was basically this insight. So it's not a new insight. This is known in the industry as a best practice. And one of the things that I discovered this after I by instinct recognized the problem and the solution. So later on, I find that it has a name. So it's called monolith first, but I did it already. But this is often the case because, if you try to solve a problem in the most simple way, you get to similar solutions. But this monolith first, one of the things that I found interesting is that one of the reasons to start with a monolith, he says, basically, even if you are sure that you are going to need microservices, you are going to have multiple teams, even if you know that for sure, still start with a modular monolith. And the reason that he says has to do with boundary friction. So basically, he says boundaries, having long-term stable boundaries in your architecture with a lot of unknowns at the start is just really, really hard. So when you are starting out, you are basically discovering the boundaries, and that's really cheap in a modular monolith where the things are just like namespaces or DLLs or whatever, just that you can refactor really quickly and change things. And once you have, confirmed what are stable boundaries that could be physical boundaries, then it's much cheaper to move it out.
Yeah.
So I found this an interesting insight, because my thinking was just, do it when you have multiple teams, start and just grow the number of microservices with the number of teams. So basically build, this is basically called the inverse Conway maneuver in terms. So Conway's law says that basically when you develop, it's exactly the same age as I am. So it's from 1967. That's how old this law is. And it says, basically, if you are writing software, then the structure of that software will reflect the organizational structure of the developer organization. And this is simply because in a team you have, communication that's really fast and quick and easy. So they can write software that's tightly coupled, and they have to work with another team, and the communication is slower. So they make agreements with the other team. Let's make an interface. So basically, even without services, even just with this works this way. So, and the inverse Conway maneuver, he basically says there's 3 ways to respond to Conway's law. One is ignore it. This is what I see a lot, and that just results in pain.
Yes.
Just pain. Then there's a second one, which is basically acknowledge it, which is, if you have a single team, try to start with try to avoid physical separation as long as you can, just for the speed. If you have multiple teams, but then you have the inverse Conway maneuver, which is basically as your architecture evolves, evolve your developer organization with the architecture. So don't take the developer organization as a given. Basically, what I'm saying is in the small, when I'm on a project, I say I build 2 things. I build a software solution and I build a team. And they are structured similar. That's within a single team, but that's also in a whole developer organization. So basically just don't take the developer organization as a given, because that would mean that your architecture is also a given.
Yes.
And that's not very good for responding to changing circumstances and insights.
Because your team will change, right? Because people move around and go to different jobs, and your team's going to change. And so, the one question I've been thinking about, and we kind of talked a little. I'll share what we talked about before the show started, but you told me before the show started that some companies are kind of going backwards and moving away from like microservices back into, the old way of doing things. And so, it got me thinking about what you were saying about the new shiny thing. And so, when microservices came out, and even now, I hear developers going, we'll just move everything to microservices. And I'm going, no, wait. No, you just don't move everything because you heard it's cool, right? And I kind of like your approach where you do it more of a monolith way and then start moving those pieces out, because that's really microservices to me is like anything else is you need to use it for what it's good for, right? And it's not good for everything. Do you agree?
Absolutely, yeah.
True.
It's definitely true, yeah.
So how do you prevent companies from going too far, in that direction and hurting themselves, essentially?
Well, basically, in my experience, it's the real risk is when the technical people in the company say this is good. So it's not often that non-technical people say, oh, you should use microservices, or that mostly then it's question. I've heard microservices. Is that something for us? But so basically, this is the responsibility of the person answering the business questions to do this honestly and without the shine in mind as the first concern, right?
Yeah.
The coolness of stuff. So basically, but this is how do you prevent them? Well, basically, the key thing here is honesty. Honesty to yourself and honesty to others. If you're really honest about why you want something, and you just realize, okay, let's say I would tell the business person this, would I be happy with it? With my reasons for doing this? And if it's not so, well, you shouldn't be happy with that situation, right?
I think
because you're paid to do something, but you're basically serving yourself. So that's So I love doing cool things and innovation. It's but if you really like that, try to find innovations that really help the business and go for those.
Yeah.
It comes back to if you look at the root cause analysis on us as individuals and as developers, it's because we're creative people and we want to be able to explore new things. And again, it comes back to that sort of organizational, more of a cultural thing, I suppose, is that if the only reason for you to want to recommend, say, microservices or Silverlight or whatever it was, is because you want to experiment with it. And that tells you that the culture of the business is kind of like slightly incorrect in that it doesn't have sufficient movement in it to recognize the needs and the potential upside value of having some time to experiment, so that people can kind of, explore things, bring that back to the business. I mean, again, Applicita copied this from Google, I believe, but we have a monthly kind of blue sky day thing where people are allowed to have like a day, because we're relatively small, but a day a month where they can just like ping out an email that says, hey, I'd like to go and like kick the tires on Maui, or I want to go and, look at something, and as long as it's, somewhere in the realms of like could possibly be broadly connected to something we're doing or could do in the future, go and do it. The only stipulation is you have to write an email that says, what did you learn? Go look at Flutter, go look at, a bunch of other things. And we try and give, our CFO would gladly come and tell you for a long time about, we spend way too much money on R&D, because I'm really passionate about having
Guilty.
being able to sort of push on, different areas that, might down the road create, business value for our customers. So, I think it's, I've certainly been in organizations, I've probably made decisions myself actually, where I've said, you know what, I really want to try out Windows Mobile 5, I think was the thing I wanted to look at. Okay, I'm gonna build a CE application for our field engineers, because I want to try, something or other. It's because organizations don't provide that sort of playpen, really, for want of a better term, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah. And also one of the things with our, for example, if you're a services company, I've worked with a lot of services companies in my career, and well, basically there was always this advocate of the devil response to trying to improve productivity. For example, say, okay, so you want to spend money that the customer is not paying for to let the people that the customer is paying for finish sooner, which means they will be paying us less. So where is the benefit exactly? And by the way, you're also going to make sure that there will be less errors. So our whole maintenance division will also earn less. So why are you here again? I'm exaggerating, right? But this is why I'm so pleased with how Applicita approaches this, because if you look at my title, you might think I'm a kind of manager, right? Like director. But I'm hands-on innovation for the stuff that the customer won't pay in a project for, but that the developers do need to work have a good developer experience and a good productivity as well. Because developers don't like that they don't, even if they can't innovate themselves, if someone makes it possible for them to skip the learning curve or to shorten it so they can use the latest technologies without the customer saying, hey, why are you, there's nothing in the backlog for these 2 weeks, what have you done, right? This is the stuff that John, asked me to look over the entire .NET stack, basically. It's where the most benefits could be held to accelerate our developers. And of course, in product development, it's a different story. And we're also going to do that. So that's still that. But yes, I basically forgot what I started saying this, but sorry. But R&D, so the cost of not doing R&D, that's what I wanted to say. Do you know what the cost is of not doing R&D? So like 2 times higher runtime cost or 2 times higher total cost of ownership of your solution. Maybe that's worth a couple of weeks of research. Maybe.
And that's, I write and talk about this all the time, is I don't see teams doing enough of that, right? They just go into whatever and without thinking about it and without learning all of it and just making it worse in a lot of cases, right? And
I think Scrum has to do with that in part. The Scrum process, the backlogs that have to do with specific functionality. Often.
It comes about how we measure activity or productivity in Agile and Scrum, right? It's I've, like many people, started to question some of the ways it's used, and you sort of think that teams are pressurized into typing. It's like you don't need to be typing; you need to be thinking.
Well, one thing I say all the time is if you're coding 100% of the day, you're doing it wrong. Right? Because that's not what our job is about, is banging out code all day. It's about what we've been talking about, right? The coding, I always say coding should be the least part of your job, right? I know developers might not, especially the younger ones, might not want to hear that, but that's reality. If you want to produce something that's going to last a while, it's going to really make the customers happy and make the company money, you have to do the upfront. You have to do the upfront.
I think it's Jimmy Bogart of the Mediator fame. He said the most valuable code is the code you don't write.
Right. Yeah. And, exactly.
It's kind of like it is just like that, right? It's kind of like you go through this as a developer, don't you? I mean, like 3 old guys, which sounded sanctimonious, but you go through this like curve of that. I remember, sitting there churning on like class design. I was really poor at class design for ages and ages, and I would just be constantly changing them. In fact, the reason why I use TDD so much, because it would tell me quickly how poor my class design was. I would sit there and just churn these things endlessly, and then I just stopped. It was like, I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll just sit here and write down what this thing needs to do, and then I kind of like do it on paper to start with, and then I'd only write it once and maybe maybe like tweak it again. But it took me years of just like hammering away on the keyboard, going, "Oh my god, I've changed this thing 5 times now, and it still doesn't make it. It's not working properly,"
Yeah.
So I think everybody eventually gets there, or most, or some do. But yeah, it's going back to your ease of doing things. That's one of the things that I could never get around with, like Orleans. When I discovered Orleans, I couldn't believe how easy it was to transition from a C# developer who wasn't worrying about distributed systems to a developer that could now build distributed systems. And it's probably not of anybody's fault on the Orleans team, or even prior to it going into dev or whatever. But it's just got such a weird mystique about it. We come across so much. For people that have heard of it, they're like, "Oh yeah, complicated," and we're like, "No, very simple."
Yeah. Just yesterday, I was talking to Robin. So yesterday I was talking to Robin Bond, the lead of the Orleans team, which is now part of the ASP.NET team. And I mentioned exactly this, my surprise, my astonishment when teams say, so in my experience, Orleans, when used properly, it just simplifies things from a developer perspective.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of things that are hard to do are kind of, take very little effort or no effort, but you still have the option to go deep, but you don't have to start by going deep.
Right.
So it's very easy, relatively speaking, to get regular, C# developers to help building distributed applications. The one thing is you have to make your design use the strengths of Orleans. Yeah. And basically, when I try to keep that simple as well, but I said this to because when you don't do the design well, then it gets complicated, unnecessarily complicated. So and this is so basically I tell teams that you are new to Orleans, I say, okay, there's just two rules. One is keep your grains small, so the grains are the small classes, so the cloud native objects, so to speak. Keep them small, and the second rule is don't make circles. Now, if you want to go really beyond that, if you understand streams, then you can do most things very well. But that's basically it. And you would be surprised, because what you often see is people take sort of big chunky programming patterns and try to implement them in Orleans. And it's the wrong granularity. So the things are too coarse, too big. They try to put an entire list in a grain instead of making every item a grain. They try to make a cache in a grain instead of making every cache entry a grain. And those are very simple things on paper. They're just one square box or two square boxes, but they make all the difference, because then people say, oh, it doesn't scale. We need to add a service bus for this piece. And before you know it, it explodes in infrastructure complexity, and it's not necessary. You can do it without all the extra stuff. This is what of the strengths of Orleans is. And what I added, I'm looking at the time, so I'm trying to get to the topic a bit more. But Orleans multi-service library, what it does is basically give you a pattern to establish those logical boundaries within your single physical service, so you can extract them later. And it has just .NET New template. It just takes like two commands. One command to create a whole multi-service, and one command to add new logical service into it. And it's completely, you have a few parameters, and it's completely, you can run it, you can build it, and all the patterns of naming and isolation that make developer experience pleasant are already tried out there. That takes a lot of try out. If you just give developers that, because it's not fun finding that stuff out. It's not fun finding out how you should name things, or what patterns you should do, but it's not fun doing the things 10 times over if it's not really adding anything. So this is the stuff I try to reach. And basically, and what I did in that multi-service library for Orleans is basically I said, okay, I want to prove it before anybody starts using it. So I just took that well-known eShop example from Microsoft, and I built two services in a modular monolith, first with the template and the tools, and then I just said, okay, let's now split it to two teams, so two physical services, and it then eventually that works, and not eventually, in the end I showed there's two lines of code changed. So we have a basket service, and we have a product service. and I moved them to separate teams. And there's 2 lines of code changed because we're now calling a generated API client, a generated REST client, instead of a grain contract. That's the whole change.
Yeah.
If you set it up, if you set the patterns up correctly. So basically, this is an automated pattern. And well, the only thing to add now is automatic guarding of those boundaries, because how do you prevent developers from, making connections that bypass the official interface? Because you can, as long as it's in the same process, in the same solution, you can just, call any grain and not just the ones that are supposed to represent the external interface.
Yeah.
So I have several ones, but there are several solutions to do that. I can do it with a Roslyn analyzer, but also with there are some unit test libraries that allow you to test architecture. So you can just make your own architecture rules in code, and it will run on build or run on CI/CD, and it will just guard those boundaries. So you prevent it from becoming a big ball of mud with tooling. And that's the other thing that I always try to do. I try to go tooling first and example second, and only documentation third, because that's the hardest thing to apply constantly. So sorry, I had to get that speech
No, it's
out.
okay. No, I like it.
Yeah. But this is how we approach it, and if you, I'm just happy to be on shows like this one, so people can just benefit from that, and give feedback and hopefully improve it even more. So this is why we also open source all our stuff. So I said to John, John, we need to make tooling that can be used without in-person guidance, because that doesn't scale. So, and the best way to do that is to just give it to the whole world, because I can't possibly help everybody.
Right.
So I'd make it open source, and I force myself and other people working on this to make it so clear and so well understandable. How do you call it? Well, easy to use, that people can just look at the repo and use it like that.
Yeah.
That's how we raise the bar by just making it extendable.
Yeah, we are running close on time, so I want to talk. I just want to bring this up real quick. We don't have a lot of time to talk about it, but how do you, when you are hired for a company or a company's working with you, how do you guide them from, going from a modular monolith to more of a monolith to a modular monolith? I mean, a modular components. How do you get them to approach coming from one and going to another?
Actually, you can't do that well. There's if people are working in a monolith, that's it. It will just take pain and a lot of effort, and maybe even a rebuild to do it better. So there's no easy way. This is the main thing you want to prevent. So if it's well structured already, you can help them discover the real stable boundaries, right? So but if those boundaries are not there, then you have to just take the pain. If you want to solve that, you have to refactor it and redesign it mostly even.
It's a good point you made earlier, actually, Dave, was that and I've literally been in a situation where I felt absolutely terrible for a startup that we were. They went into used another shop, and they kind of got this system to they spent pretty much every penny that they had on it, then having lots of issues, and then brought it to us to see if we could do something with it, and it literally was I always try and see the best working software or not working software. It's got to have some value, but you literally was there's nothing I can do with this. It's really, really poor. And it's well, how much would it cost you to fix it? It was basically start again almost.
Start over.
And they were we're out of money. It was business destroying. And you just think, how can we? I say this to Vincent, and I'm not a marketeer, and I've had to learn a lot of marketing. But how can people like us, the three of us, how can we get ahead of the decision making, the architectural decision making with companies, right? Because why are we always brought in when the thing's already on fire? What's the message we have to deliver, and what's the process that we have to put together as people who do this kind of thing that kind of stops people from making those sort of like business crushing decisions. I mean, another company that we worked with had spent $4 million on their application with their own inbuilt team. And it wasn't as bad as the previous one I was describing. It was like probably 50% better, but it cost us $10 million to put it right. And we were like, if it had just come to us, we probably would have spent $2 million building it.
Yeah. And
True.
I think you brought up a good fact that a lot of times when people hire me, it's almost too late. Right.
Yeah.
And probably you too, because they wait until they're really in pain before they contact somebody who's an expert. And by the time, they get to us, we go, well, it's going to be really hard for me to do much at this point.
Yeah.
Right.
But
So one successful story. Sorry. Yeah. One successful story I was in helping people who were already 4 years along is they had a traditional microservices architecture. They ignored Conway's law, so 2 teams and 30 services. And then I said, okay, the next service, I was adding a third team. I said, the next service is going to be a multi-service. So it's just integrated as just another microservice in the existing thing, but all the new functionality would be added in there. So at least for everything that you add, you don't have to rebuild all that's there.
Yeah.
But of course, it was already scalable. So if you have a big ball of mud that has hit a hard scalability limit, then you have to change it. But you can also just focus on making the new stuff in there.
Right.
Cost efficient. The strangler pattern in, right? Kind of like start to put programmer work into, in that case, kill off some of those other services and start bringing them back to the multi-service, when the business need allows or something. We've done some of that before, but yeah, that whole kind of intervention thing, if you ever crack it, Dave, just give me a shout, right? It's like, because I really feel bad for people, just feel like, I've let them down in some weird way. Why didn't you come to Applicita first? Why didn't you come to a second?
Right.
It's an interesting problem to try and solve.
Yeah. Well, we're out of time, so I'll ask you the question I ask every first-time guest on the show, and I'll have John answer first, and then Vincent, and that is, what do you do for fun that's not coding?
Okay, so 2 things really. Although I do spend an awful lot of time at work, so I'm a really keen gym guy. So I spend I've cut back a little bit. I'm probably like 3 or 4 times in the gym now. I used to be like a six time, and I really love motorcycles. So I like cars, but I love motorbikes. So we sponsor a racing team here in the national championship called British Superbikes. I like doing track days and kind of like riding my bike kind of out on the road and stuff as well. So that's my small and coding as well. I actually sort of have to consider that now like a hobby, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, when you're CEO, then coding's a hobby, right?
But
True.
Probably releases something new and he says, "Hey, John, look, we've done this," and I'm like, "Right, okay, I'm doing this tonight."
How about you, Vincent?
Yeah, so, I like to be outdoors. Perhaps my complexion sort of gives that away. But so I love walking, swimming, biking, also gym, but not as much as John, like 3 times a week. I love to read science fiction, like the traditional space opera kind. I like that if it's well written. I'm also a bit into an audiophile, so I like, and I use like magician's gear. So I use DACs, how do you call it? No, DACs, DACs, to the stuff that you're probably familiar with. Yeah. So I have an Army DAC, and I have studio monitors. So I use studio equipment. Because I found that all the snake oil is in the consumer stuff, and the musicians know what it should sound like, so they have stuff that has no bullshit in it. So this gives you the most bang for your buck, and I do the same as with other technology. I keep it simple as possible, so I have monitors with built-in speakers and just balanced cables to a DAC. And by the way, I also have in-ear monitors like you use on stage. I have those French ones from Ultimate Ears that they scan your ear and they make a 3D model and then print it, right? So that's also stuff that I like to do.
That's
So,
cool.
yeah.
And you make a good point that, last year I was in a recording studio with a guitarist I used to work with, and you're right, the sound is just tremendously different than what you normally hear, right? Because
Yeah.
I mean, he's got one speaker that costs $10,000 or something like that, right? It's crazy expensive stuff, and so yeah. Well, I've got to go because we're over time already, and I've really liked having you guys on the show for the first time, and I'm going to have you back because we barely even scratched the surface of this topic, and
Absolutely.
it seems like a big topic, and we need to maybe have you back on later and drill down into some specific things and to help people, not only understand, this kind of architecture, but how do you move from an old architecture to a one like this, right?
Yeah,
So,
definitely.
so thanks a lot.
Absolutely. Would love to come back. Thank you.
Yeah. So thanks a lot for being on the show. Have a great rest of the evening. I know it's late there, and I'll see you next time on the show.
Okay.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave. Take care.
Thanks. Wow, that show just went really fast. Maybe because I had two guests on, and I'm not used to that. So I don't even know where the time went, but I really like talking to those guys, and I'm serious. I want to have them back on. So, and I hope you do too. If you do, let me know. Do a tweet or put it in the comments. But we only have a minute or two left. So here's my geek humor for this week. Somebody tweeted this, and you can see something happened with the printing of this McDonald's box or whatever it is, and it actually has some kind of code error on the side of the box. It looks like it's from China, and so I'm going, really? There's not one person there that that said, well, that's not right. And they printed, who knows how many millions or hundreds of thousands of those things they printed, right? Anyway, I thought it was funny. I don't know about you, but yeah, I've never seen something like that before. As always, we need to think about our friends in the Ukraine, and give them our support the most we can, and because this isn't going to be over anytime soon. And every morning I wake up with more bad news or bad news that's coming, and so we really need to get this over and move on and make the world a better place and not stop this war stuff. Anyway, also, like every week, I hope you will help me help the kids from the slums in India. And there's lots of I posted 3 ways of helping on this one slide. But you all know, if you've been watching the show, that when I go to India, I go to the Voice of Slum. And last year we brought them 5 computers, and I got to hang out with the kids. You can see the pictures from my visit there, and it was the best part of my trip when I went to India, is hanging out with Dave and Chandy and the kids at the Voice of Slum. So we're software engineers. We can help them. You just need to get off your butt and type in one of those URLs and go help them. All right. Right. So we have a show next week. Alan is going to be here, and we're going to be talking about SQL Plus and SQL Server and Cosmos DB. And so if you do data, which we all do, you need to watch this show. And so don't forget, next week. Or the week after. I don't know. So also every week I encourage you to go donate blood. I'm doing a contest right now. If you have a U.S. Post Office box, then if you donate blood this weekend, and you post proof of that, I will send you an autographed copy of my Code Performance book. So I hope you'll do that. But do it anyway, not just for the book, because all the blood banks are in the shortage. They really need your help, and someday you're going to need help. And so it's time to start giving now. And I was there just I think 2 weeks ago donating, and I hit 16 gallons. I can't believe I donated 16 gallons of blood, but I have. And so I hope you will too, because it helps your fellow humans, and it will help you someday. All right. Well, thanks for watching the show. I had a great time on this show. I hope you learned something, and I hope you'll be back on the show next time. If you have any suggestions or comments, make sure you email them. Send me some emails. I don't get any emails, and so send me an email of who you want to be on the show, if you like the show, and anything you want to talk to me about. All right. With that, I'll see you next time on Rockin the Code